everybody. Welcome. So here we are with our February 350 Milwaukee meeting, and we're going to be featuring a special guest speaker tonight, Greta Neubauer, who is Wisconsin State Representative and has been taking a lot of the lead in Madison in the legislature on climate action issues and legislation. So we'll be really anxious to hear a view from the state from Greta in about 15 minutes. In the meantime, we're going to get a little overview of what's been going on in the world and what we've been doing as a group. There's a couple of interesting things came up in the news in the last week or so, and it's about the big companies, the big banks that have so much power over this issue, and they contribute so much to the global warming, and yet they're the hardest people to really pin down to change their ways. So there was this article on the business page of the Journal Sentinel last week, Tuesday. So it said here that there is this study that was done by the New Climate Institute of 25 of the larger corporations, including groups like Amazon and Walmart, the big ones, and that many of them have been misleading the consumers by using accounting practices that make their environmental goals relatively meaningless, or they're excluding key parts of their businesses in their calculations for reducing emissions. And so that's a lot of greenwashing that's going on. They try to sound good, but they really aren't doing much. And there's no way that they're going to be able to meet their promises for emissions reductions if this is going to be the way they play the game. And then there was another interesting thing that, on a more positive note, the federal financial banking regulators have released new guidances for the big banks and their fossil fuel investments. Now, these are guidances. They're not rules that are enforceable, but at least they're coming out with some strong guidances. The Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. Now, I have very, very little background in economics, but I don't really know anything about the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that out of the federal banking system, but they started talking about the banks having to take climate change seriously and plan for the long-term impact of climate change, not just short-term profits. This got new guidance that's just been released from them for the banks, tells the banks that they cannot greenwash. They have to follow through on their climate goals, which is just what this other article was about them not, about the corporations not doing. But the banks also have climate goals, and they also need to start taking them seriously. And so we're really, in our work with the Chase Bank as our target here in Milwaukee, we need to be going inside and talking to the Chase Bank managers and just going friendly and let them know that there's these new guidelines that have come down from the OAC, and that they need to start taking these guidelines seriously, and that we support these new guidelines for them, and that they should support them too, and that this is a serious situation. Climate change is now. So we've been going over the last couple months, we've been going to the Chase Bank up on Silver Spring Drive, and we've got people here who are with us. Let's see, Richard here, you've been joining us the last few weeks, and what do you think about it, Richard? Do you think we're getting some good response from passersby?
Well, yeah, it's kind of encouraging sitting out there when it's very cold and your toes are getting cold, but people do honk their horn. In other words, there's many more people agreeing than being neutral or not agreeing. So it's it's kind of a real positive experience for all of us, especially for me who just started attending the protests. It gives me a more it's helpful talking about my ideas that I believe about climate change and then putting them to action. It helps to ground my helps to ground my ideas.
But I also like to comment directly in terms of what Richard just said. And if I might, as we're out on those corners, and we get the reaction, the honking of the horns. And we've learned this from the last Iraq War. So many cars go by for the first time and see our signs and see us out there. And they think about what we just said. They think about that. And then they read more or listen to the news more. And then they seek more information. And they begin to get on our side if they weren't. And along the way, they may join us down the trail. But it starts that, as activists, our biggest tool is education. And so we are really kind of pushing that button to start the education with people out there in those cars. So I just wanted you to understand that we're not alone. This happens all around the country. And it's so important as we educate our population around climate change. Thank you, Julie. I'm going to shut up.
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah. Does anyone else like to make a comment about their experiences on Fridays out there on the street corners in front of Chase Bank?
Well, I'll do some sharing.
Okay.
There was one woman who stopped and she said, what are you protesting about? And it was explained that we were there because Chase Bank was a #1 funder of fossil fuels, and we wanted that to stop. And she said, oh, I just opened a Chase Bank account. And she said, maybe I should have done that. And so, that's part of the education process, definitely. And, we can go on and tell them, well, credit unions are a good way for people to not have fees, but earn interest instead. And you can also educate them on fiscal policy.
I think over the years that we've been out there, we've had a number of people who come up to us and said, oh my gosh, I was just going to go in the bank. I guess maybe I shouldn't be banking here anymore. And they changed their mind about what they're doing. But I think the also, as you suggest, to tell them, well, there's an option, that's a good one, and that's the credit unions, because they want to know what they should do. They want an option given to them. So all of us need to check where we're banking individually, and we need to look at our investments. If we have if we're lucky enough to have some investments, or if we have pension plans, what are those pension plans invested in? And challenge some of that if we need to, because it all makes a big difference. If we can pull the money out from the fossil fuel industry, we can make a huge impact. So,
well, thank you, Julie. Jan is on the stack.
Oh, I just wanted to agree that I think we're really raising consciousness of when we're out there. One couple walked by holding hands, strolling past us, and they looked at our signs, but they didn't say anything to us, but they said to each other, well, we're not going to bank in, we're not going to bank there, and then they walked on. So it's like, I think we really are getting, some good responses, and definitely much more positive than negative. I mean, we were called communists the other day, but other than that, for the most part, I think it's been very good.
yeah,
So I just wanted to add that. So.
good. Thanks. Anybody else?
Well, on the chat, Eric Newson is bringing up a point. Eric, would you like to chime in, please?
Sure. So I don't know how many of you went to the march, when was it, 2019 at the Capitol? But I
In
think,
DC,
pardon?
in DC,
No, in Madison.
or Madison. Oh,
Yep, 2019, I believe it was.
mhm.
It was the big, Greta Thunberg. Everybody should be marching, and everybody marched. I don't remember what month it was. I think it was in the fall, if I remember right. Fall of 2019. But personally, that march meant a lot more to me than these Chase Bank demonstrations. I think just having that many people together
Mhm.
and groups there was, Extinction Rebellion, I think, was one of the primary organizers. I don't, was 350 Madison helping organize that? Maybe one of those guys can chime in. But the amount of publicity that was gotten was huge. And the same, Fridays for Future global group is calling for climate strike on March 25th. I think it would be a really, really good idea for 350 Madison, 350 Milwaukee. I don't think there are any Extinction Rebellion groups in Madison or Milwaukee anymore that are active. To try and put something together. It was really cool. I mean, the
Yeah.
UW marching band was there. I don't know how many of you guys were there, but it was cool.
Well, that's a great point, Eric, and I would ask us to put that in the bike rack for later in the meeting, then Julie would facilitate that. Our presenter is ready, and I think we should get going. Hey, Julie.
Okay. So Greg Walter has been making the contacts with Greta Neubauer's office. And so I'd like to have Greg take over and do the introductions of our state representative, Greta Neubauer. Greg?
Okay. Well, we're happy to have tonight Greta Neubauer with us. She is the representative from District 17, which is in the Racine area. And she was first elected there in January of 2018 and re-elected in November of 2018 and 2020. She just began serving as the state minority leader in the House last month in January. But more pertinent probably to tonight's meeting and our focus, she's got quite a climate resume already. She was the director and co-founder of the Fossil Fuel Divestment Student Network. She was also a graduate of Middlebury College, where she was co-founder of the Divest Middlebury group or movement. And interestingly, she was, I've discovered, was also a 350.org fellow, which I found quite interesting. Maybe we should talk a little bit about that. Looking over her resume, she's probably been active in maybe a dozen other organizations. So pretty impressive for a young person, especially compared to most of us. So with that, I think we'll let Greta take this over. Greta?
Thank you, Greg. Well, that's very kind of you. You dug into my resume. You went back a while, so very sweet of you. So really happy to be here with you all tonight. I am coming at you from Madison. I'm here a lot these days, so here in my hotel room, and just really excited to be able to talk to you all about some of the work that we have going on in the Capitol, some of the bills that my colleagues and I, Democrats, have put forward, some of the bills that we're pushing back against. I'll just talk for a couple of minutes, and then I want to save most of our time for questions. But I'll start by saying just a little bit more about myself. As Greg said, I've been in the climate movement for quite a while. I became pretty engaged my first semester of college. Upon really understanding the urgency and seriousness of the climate crisis, and was, as I think many people are, incredibly concerned, really had sort of an existential crisis about the threat that we all face and the reality that, that my generation and so many generations afterwards will contend with. And I was very lucky to be in college at the time that the fossil fuel divestment movement was really starting. That became a real political home for me. I worked on the campaign at my school and then co-founded this organization that supported students around the country who were running divestment campaigns. I was able to do a lot of incredible work through that and work with partners at Climate Justice Alliance and other organizations to try to root our movement in the urgency of this moment and the impacts people are facing now, in the importance of thinking through an equity lens in terms of our solutions to the climate crisis. And I really do feel that all of that work, those years in the climate movement, trained me very well for my job now. Because I think often when people think about the legislature running for office, they think about passing bills, right? Writing policy and passing bills. And unfortunately, when you are in the minority party in the Wisconsin legislature, very, very gerrymandered legislature, it's hard to get a hearing for your bills. And so what we have to do, and the way I try to approach this job, is to think about the organizing that we can do from this position. And that's been something that I've really tried to focus on, and now is going to be an even bigger focus for me as the Assembly Democratic leader. We really want to support our entire caucus to do more to get the message out, to move the political dialogue, to provide opportunities for members of the public to meaningfully engage in this process. So it's fun for me to get to be here with you all. I love getting to speak to folks who are working on issues of climate. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the bills that my colleagues and I put forward in the last year. A lot of these came out of work that happened through the Governor's Task Force on Climate Change, which I know some of you engaged in. I was the Democratic Assembly representative on that task force. On the group kind of focused on energy and housing and infrastructure. And we came up with a lot of ideas. A lot of ideas came from people across the state that we heard from in our listening sessions, from members of the task force led by Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, people from all over the state, from different industries and backgrounds and political persuasions, right? People who just know that the climate crisis is a problem. It's a problem now for Wisconsinites. It's only going to become more of a crisis for our state, and it'll particularly impact people who are most vulnerable, low-income communities, people of color, rural populations. So I'll highlight a few of the bills that we introduced in December. Actually, it was November of last year. And just to give you a sense of kind of the scope of this 22 bill package. Again, what I'll say is when we introduced this, I did not think, oh, we're going to get a committee meeting scheduled and pass all of these bills right away. But what I knew was that it was really important for us to have a comprehensive plan for how Wisconsin could begin to address climate change, that we all as Democrats could stand united around, and that we could go around the state and promote and put some pressure on Republicans to take action on these issues. So the bills range from everything from social cost of carbon, which is including the negative social costs, right? Healthcare, economy, tourism of burning fossil fuels. When the Public Service Commission is making decisions about siting or permitting future generating capacity. So if they were going to be siting a new natural gas plant, they would need to say, okay, and what are the costs on Wisconsinites to do that? We had school weatherization and energy efficiency grants, carbon sequestration and sustainable agriculture, on-bill financing, allowing people to include those costs of weatherization and home improvements on their bills so that that's a more sustainable cost, not all upfront. We had biodigester grants, positions for climate science at the UW and at counties, resources for focus on energy, particularly focused on low-income people, food waste reduction pilots, a climate change local planning bill, complete streets, which means that streets that are built need to have certain requirements, including pedestrian and paths and bikeways. I won't go through all of them, but we'll just highlight a couple more of the big ones. Racial disparity impact studies, making sure that DNR is including that lens as they are citing facilities. We had a Wisconsin Climate Corps bill. This was one of the bigger price tags. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the discussion around the Climate Corps at the federal level. This mirrors that in many ways, recognizing that we have a lot of infrastructure investments that need to be made to make us more resilient to climate change and to address underlying impacts of climate change. And we have a lot of young people who are looking for good jobs and for opportunities to find a career that is sustainable, that hopefully has union representation and a good long-term path. So we're really excited about that bill. Green jobs, training grants, and energy innovation grant program, and others. So there's a lot there. Of course, I think you can find most of folks can find those online, but happy to send along a summary if that would be helpful to you all. And there's more coming. There are a number of additional bills that members of the Assembly Democratic Caucus are going to be putting out in the coming months, because we know that this isn't enough, right? There's additional urgency around this issue. And we want to make sure that we are being very clear about the sense of urgency that we have and the need to take action soon. So, I'm happy to answer any questions you all have about Republican bills or sort of problematic things that have been proposed as of late in the Capitol. And I think what I'll do is kind of at the end, just share a little bit more about ways people can engage after we've had a chance to discuss and answer any questions. So I'll pause there. Greg.
So I'll kick it off and ask maybe what's an obvious question, but what is the reaction from the other side of the aisle? Are there representatives and senators, as far as that's concerned, who are, how do I want to phrase it, open to voting for some of these bills? And do you get a feel for what they feel or believe themselves as opposed to what they say publicly?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great question. So unfortunately, it does not appear that we've got support to move these bills forward this session. We're about to wrap up this month or next our legislative session for the rest of 22. And we have not seen, I think, enough interest to move these bills forward. What I will say is that certainly in one-on-one conversations with representatives on the other side of the aisle, there is an understanding that this is an issue that's impacting Wisconsinites. Whether or not people want to say climate change, they know that flooding has become more intense and more frequent, right? They know that growing seasons are changing for farmers, or that tourism in their community is being impacted by erratic seasons. And so there is that growing understanding, and I think there is growing willingness to do some work on energy issues. And we have seen that this session with Republican introduction of a bill on third-party financing of solar, on community solar, on EV charging stations. Now, none of those bills are the way that I would written the way that I would draft them, right? And they have various sort of amongst them, what I would say are sort of problematic provisions. However, what we're seeing more broadly is an understanding that we cannot ignore this issue anymore, and that Wisconsin is behind. And whether or not you say we should address climate change, or we should take advantage of opportunities in green energy, or create good jobs, or allow the free market to work in terms of EVs coming to the state, electric vehicles, there is movement. And I've been in the Capitol for 4 years. I would like to see it moving faster. But there has been movement, and I am optimistic that we're going to see the passage of some green energy legislation in the near future.
Well, thank you, Greta. But also the thumbs up as facilitators. We like to know how the group feels. And so John's got a big smile on his face right now. That helps. When you shake your head, you like something, or you put your thumb up physically. That makes it all the more cohesive. So I want to really encourage this. On the chat, on the stack, we've got Charlie, Tom, Jan, John, and Jed. Okay, Charlie.
Hi, Greta. Are you familiar with the concern out in the Driftless area about the pattern wind farm that's projected or proposed for out there, 700-foot high turbines? And they've been, I guess, working with the Public Service Commission and trying to get some attention to their situation out there. And they complain that the Public Service Commission does not appear to be very independently thinking, so to speak. And so there seems to be kind of a relationship between the Republican legislature and what the Public Service Commission thinks. And I just wonder what you think about that connection, that they really don't act very independently in terms of their thinking process.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not familiar with all the specifics of the project that you're referencing. But I guess what I'll say is sort of the way that I understand our relation to the Public Service Commission is that we do pass legislation that impacts their scope, right? And the way that they can analyze projects. So I mentioned a little while ago the social cost of carbon, right? Right now, they're not allowed to take into consideration those impacts on society that building a fossil fuel plant would have, right? And so what I would say is we as legislators need to understand that we need to empower the Public Service Commission to act with a more broad framework than only cost and reliability, because there are other priorities that people in the state have. Those are two central ones, but they're not everything. And so, I can't really speak kind of to one-on-one relationships there, but I guess what I'll say is I do think that it's our responsibility as legislators and the administration to empower the Public Service Commission to make decisions and to require them to make decisions that take more factors into consideration.
Have you considered public health or health issues, health impacts? The people in the Driftless feel that there are pretty severe health impacts from these large turbines. Is there anything in your proposals that would I guess, ask them to consider the impacts on public health?
There, in terms of our social cost of carbon bill, there is a health component to that. So again, what are the impacts on people's well-being that are created through burning fossil fuels? We don't have one that's specifically on wind turbines or other forms of renewable energy, but always appreciate the suggestion. So
okay, thank you.
Well, thank you, Greta. Thank you, Charlie. Next, we have Tom Seary, former state representative and certainly knowledgeable about the PSC. Tom, what do you want to talk about?
Well, two things, and just as long as George has brought it up, are you any relation to Jeff Neubauer?
I am, yeah, he's my dad.
I figured. Tell him hi from Tom Seary. I haven't seen him in a while, but I'm sure he's out doing good things too. The idea I want to talk with you about is the family farmers. They are hurting. And one of the ways that they could get some additional income is if they were able or help to get wind generators on their farms that they would own. I know Wisconsin Energy is looking at trying to put wind generators out there that Way Energies controls. But if the family farmer gets it, and has control over the money that thing makes, that will get more money for family farmers. Okay, so I encourage you thinking through that. The second thing is, it would be interesting if Republicans voted against family farmers. It would put them in a difficult spot if their people are going to be able to get some help in getting income. So that's my idea. I've been talking with folks at the Farm Bureau, not the Farm Bureau, at the Farmers Union, because they're always pretty good. So that's show that into your hopper of a million things to do. So those are my two thoughts.
Yeah, no, thank you. Those are both really great suggestions. And, on the carbon sequestration bill and the regional biodigesters bill, which both are aimed at small farms in particular, we have seen a fair bit of bipartisan interest. So I think you're absolutely right that is one way that we can kind of hopefully cross partisan lines here in recognizing that farmers are having an incredibly hard time, and if we can provide them, some support to make do, to diversify their work on the farm, that's a positive thing. So really appreciate those suggestions, and thank you for your work. The Farmers Union's great. They were very helpful to us in writing these bills too.
Well, thanks, Greta. Thank you, Tom. We'll hear from you later. And we got 6 people on the stack. Hey, Jan, John, you're next. Go ahead, Jan.
Hi, Greta. Thank you for talking with us tonight. This is really great. Can you give us some hope here and tell us what the greatest success story you would say with both with people coming together now that is happening?
Yeah, I'll speak first to sort of some of my experience in the climate movement, which is, again, through the fossil fuel divestment movement. And I really am often pretty blown away by the impacts that movement has had, right? Really, it was designed as a way primarily to raise awareness about the impacts that burning fossil fuels have on all of us. And then additionally, to be able to highlight the ties between fossil fuel companies and the political process, right? And the ways in which they're getting preferential treatment and subsidies, and in a way that's not beneficial to the public. And so when I started working on that movement, about 10 years ago now, there was so much less awareness, right? People really thought of climate change as something that was far away, that wasn't probably going to impact them. And of course, that's changed. And it's changed in part because the impacts are increasing in intensity and frequency. But also, I think it's because of that movement, which I know you and so many others, members of your organization and so many others have been integral to. So that really does make me hopeful. And many of the people who I worked with in the youth divestment movement went on to found the Sunrise Movement. And what they've been able to accomplish, we haven't seen the bills passed that we want to see passed at the federal level, but what they've been able to accomplish in terms of changing the narrative around the urgency of this crisis is huge. And what we see from voters is climate change is a top priority. And so that's huge. And I do think we can all often feel like, because of our understanding of the urgency of this issue, like nothing is enough. But I will say that from a sort of 10,000 foot perspective, and especially being in the Capitol and seeing how long it takes for ideas to gain popularity and for policy to get passed, we have seen such a significant shift on climate in the last couple of years, to the point where, again, even if Republicans don't say the words climate change, they're holding hearings on EV charging bills and community solar and other things, because they know that they need to do that to win elections. So I hope that means we see more progress in policy soon.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Greta. Thank you, Jan. Hey, John.
Yeah, Representative Neubauer, thank you once again for coming out and I always appreciate your dogged determination and creativity on climate change. So it's wonderful always to get an update from you. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about, what's possible currently around climate justice. Are there, is there an opportunity for that to be an issue that might allow us, to move forward? Or, so I think about some of the current Republican bills, which clearly have, some challenges, but in the context, for example, of community solar, or some of the other pieces, are there ways that we can pragmatically move forward and really do something in our state that comes together on climate justice? This issue that I think we're all becoming more aware of, and this intersectionality of justice and diversity and inclusion and climate.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I would say, yeah, I definitely think there are opportunities. I think the one that sort of comes to the front for me always is the jobs angle, right? We have a state in which I live in Racine. You all are obviously in Milwaukee. Significant historic redlining and racism that has led to really different lives for people of color versus white folks in our communities. And the good news is, right, that addressing climate change means that we are creating the kind of jobs that help people have greater opportunities, right? Racine, Milwaukee, we were places where we actually had, relative to many parts of the country, greater equality because we had so many really good union jobs, right? Where people could have a good life, they could retire, they could send their kids to school or, help them get started in life. And those are the kind of jobs that we're talking about. And right now, of course, we're in a moment in which there's a worker shortage and people, would claim there's too many jobs for the number of people we have, but things will balance out and Wisconsin will always need good jobs. And so I really do see that as kind of one of the primary opportunities for us in saying, wait a second, so Republicans are actually going to prioritize fossil fuels over allowing us to create good jobs and green energy here in Wisconsin. They're going to prioritize that over infrastructure investments or, EV charging stations so that people can take advantage of these, new cars coming on the market. And I think that message is resonant. I often find myself in rooms or on panels with Scott Coonan from the Wisconsin Conservative Energy Forum, right? He doesn't talk about climate change, but he says we should not be missing on the opportunity that we have in front of us. And Wisconsin, government is standing in the way. I said on the last panel, like in terms of, some of these issues, government should actually just get out of the way and allow the market to work. And he was like, I'm with Greta, so not on many things, but on that. So anyway, I do think there's real opportunities there and, powerful interests trying to stop that movement from happening. But I think there will be, I'll leave it at that. I look forward to progress.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks,
John.
Greta. Thanks, John. This is George Martin. And as facilitator, I want to step aside so I can intervene on this direct subject.
Great.
As we talk about climate justice. I'm one of the people who worked out of 350.org, but also worked on the very unique city-county task force on climate and economic equity, which relates to those communities within our county that are most affected. I'm just going to say it, people of color, in terms of bad housing, in terms of asthma, in terms of all kinds of reflections, in terms of the most greenhouse gases. And so with this county task force, it's a 3-year planning process, and we are finishing our 2nd year. We have something like 7 or 8 working groups across the board in terms of our community. We're looking toward passing the recommended reports to our task force and then to the city and the county, and making a community-wide presentation, especially here at 350.org, in terms of what we're working on. And unique things are happening, and things are happening outside of our planning. 15 electric buses with the county, the police department, going hybrid with their SUVs. There are all kinds of things, and most encouraging in terms of the private sector also. So I just want to have us look forward to about 2 months down this road, and we can join in and ask everybody to join us into this effort here in Milwaukee County, the city and the county. So thank you, and excuse me for interjecting there.
No, I'll just say, yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, George. And Representative Supreme Moore Umakunde works with the county. Also, a new state legislator has been certainly keeping us updated on what's going on with that task force, which is great, and really bringing those ideas to the Capitol. So yeah, certainly Milwaukee is a real leader in that, and hopefully other places will follow.
Okay. Thanks again, Greta. Jed Downs.
Hi, Greta, or Representative Neubauer, sorry.
Greta's good.
Okay, so we've been trying to influence policy by writing our legislatures, occasionally writing out of district, contacting, writing comments to the PSC, writing comments to the DNR. Nothing, you never get much feedback when you send those letters. It's kind of into a black hole. And in terms of influencing Republican lawmakers, I've thought that, well, it seems like manufacturers and businesses have a lot more influence than individuals or their constituents. And I'm wondering if there's any path you see that we can really begin to leverage some of those businesses so that they may start to swing their opinions.
Yeah, great question. And I think, I'll just pause for a second to say, certainly understand that feeling and that frustration. I think to me, a lot of that comes down to gerrymandering, right? And if we had a situation in which the state of Wisconsin, which is a purple state, red or blue, depending on the year, was actually reflected in the legislature, we would absolutely see more action. So hopefully we'll make some progress with the maps this year, but really understand that, yeah, it's an uphill battle in terms of having what the people of Wisconsin want to see happen reflected in the Capitol. So I think that going for, working with businesses and allying to try to have them speak up on these issues is a great strategy. We've got in my neck of the woods, S.E. Johnson, a company that is doing a lot in terms of sustainability and really trying to use recycled plastics and work on ocean waste and all these things. And then they can't, basically take the steps they want to actually be powering themselves with green energy. So, we've got a number of businesses here in Wisconsin, Miller Coors and S.E. Johnson and Johnson Controls, right, who really want to be leaders in sustainability and are being, again, held back by the legislature. So I think, if anyone has sort of connections or work with them, or you could do joint events or anything like that, I think is great. We certainly are in communication with those folks and doing what we can to make that case. And yeah, just leveraging their voices is really powerful. Always happy to talk more specifics on that if anyone wants to follow up. So yeah.
Thanks, Greta. Thank you, Jed. Hey, Tim.
I think I'm on now.
Yes, you are.
Thanks, Greta, for being here. And it's good to see everyone from 350.org. This is kind of a general question, but sometimes I have difficult time deciphering what should be state legislation and what should be national legislation. And sometimes I think of the legislation that goes down in California, they act like a different country. Mm-hmm. And so I just wondered if you could comment on that, but because I don't know, you comment.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I guess the thing that I'll say to start is that, of course, the way the federal government operates is different than the way we operate in terms of their ability to spend money. So in Wisconsin, we basically can't really borrow in any substantive way. And we are limited by what we bring in. right now, we have a significant surplus, and there has been very little movement by Republicans to invest that back. We have $3.8 billion surplus. And so we do have resources we could be spending on these programs right now. But generally, when we're talking about, a program like the, nationally discussed Climate Corps, that creates hundreds of thousands, if not millions of jobs, that's something that we really would need federal government support on, because they have the ability to spend those kind of dollars. Many of the kind of, let's say, detailed or kind of wonky policy pieces in terms of regulation for fossil fuels or green energy, a lot of that is Wisconsin. And I guess what I would say is, there isn't like a clear sort of hard and fast line there. And so I would just always encourage folks to reach out to their legislators and ask. We have some really amazing resources in the Capitol. We have essentially researchers who we can call and say, hey, like, what are other states doing on this issue, right? Or is there regulation coming from the federal government on this? Or what are our options? So certainly would encourage folks to sort of pursue, if you have specific questions, that angle. And then I think generally, everything I talked about here is possible for us to do at the state level. I would say most of kind of the policies that I've seen you all and other 350 groups work on have been things that we can influence at the state level. So definitely would just encourage folks to keep doing that.
Thanks, Greta, and thank you, Tim. Hello, Linda Frank, and I want to mention that as I talked about the city-county task force earlier, Linda chairs working groups. She's done a lot of really good things with the task force. Thank you, Linda. What's your point?
Yeah. Hi, Greta. And thank you, George. So yeah, many of the themes that you mentioned in your introduction, Greta, are themes and solutions that are being put forward by the Milwaukee City County Task Force as well. And what I think is especially important from the perspective of state legislation that we cannot do locally, that you mentioned on energy efficiency and renewable energy, are the on-bill financing, the third-party financing for renewable energy, and the community solar, which, all those things and what you were talking about in terms of taking into account climate impacts at the Public Service Commission are really important. What I want to ask you about is something that there's increasing recognition about, but I think we still have to bring it to the forefront, and that is on nature-based climate solutions. So I want to put it out to you now as to whether you're involved in any of those efforts at the state level.
Yeah, I think carbon sequestration would fall in that bucket, right? So that's working with farmers to sequester carbon.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah. Farming is a major area where the more we switch to regenerative farming methods, we are sequestering carbon and creating healthy soils.
Yeah, so that's
as opposed to being the opposite, as opposed to being a climate problem, it becomes a climate solution. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, no, so that's definitely one. And then certainly working on efforts around additional tree planting and discussions around sort of the forestry industry in Wisconsin and how we can make that more sustainable, but always welcome to share new ideas too, because we definitely always more to learn. So really appreciate that. Thank you, Linda.
Thanks, Greta. Thank you, Linda. Hey, Jim Schultz.
Evening. I just wanted to touch on a topic was briefly kind of alluded to earlier as far as regulations, state and federal. And Wisconsin has always been concerned about the environment because we believe that the work environment that workers have to work in is a part of the overall environment. And if the work environment isn't safe, if it's not healthy, the overall environment is going to be less safe and less healthy. And one of the concerns we've had for a long time, if you remember a few years ago in the valley down in Milwaukee, there was a facility there that had a propane tank explosion because over the years, Wisconsin's regulations had been changed so that we didn't have our own regulations as far as how to install the propane tanks and the lines and maintenance and all that kind of things. They got rewritten to basically say whatever the federal guidelines are, that's what Wisconsin has too. And then the Republicans worked hard on the federal level to get them repealed, which meant that there was therefore no regulation here in Wisconsin. So we're hoping that as we write these new proposals and these new plans, that this will be taken into consideration when we write these, that we have good legislation that requires regulations, and but that there's good regulation in place that requires them to consider that at the state level as well as the federal, because one of the ways we get good, strong federal regulation is because if California has its own regulations and Wisconsin has its own, Ohio and Montana and Texas, the big corporations say, we can't comply with all these. We got to get one good standard federal regulation. But like OSHA regulations, they say this is the minimum. You have to be at least this safe.
Mhm.
Whereas the state standards could always be more proactive. And we're hoping that you'll consider having that as a part of the plans that you're putting forward, as well as worker education, so they know how to work on the job safely and what the hazards are and things like that.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for coming tonight and really appreciate it. But if you could maybe touch on if you're working on any of that with the stuff going on.
Yeah, thank you for that. And, I think you hit on something that's really important that we try to keep at the center of all of this, right? Which is that, again, if people think of climate change as something that's far away or maybe going to impact their kids or grandkids, there's a lot less urgency to vote, in a way that supports climate action or get involved. And so it's really crucial, I think, in all of this that we point to the ways that addressing climate change makes people's lives better right now, right? Whether that's reducing inequities in our state or creating those jobs, whatever it is, those hopefully, as I said, good union jobs. So, we're always discussing workers' rights issues. I would say we have not explicitly tied the pieces that you're talking about to our work on climate, but really appreciate you raising that and definitely happy to talk about that. We've got a very active labor caucus as legislative Democrats, and we are consistently working on new policies there. So please do send along thoughts, and I'll share that with my colleagues.
Thanks, Greta. Hey, thank you, Jim, and thanks for the work of Wisconsin. Appreciate it. Hey, Kermit.
Hey, thank you. And thank you, Greta, for being here. Well, I'll just start off saying, people may gripe about Zoom, but if it weren't for Zoom, I wouldn't be able to have jumped from a presentation I was facilitating on beneficial electrification to hang with some of my 350 buddies in Milwaukee. So I'm glad to be able to be here, and thanks for holding this meeting, George and friends. Anyways, this is the question that bubbles up for me amongst many. I'm trying to focus is what strategic thoughts, Greta, you might have regarding the challenge that I see, and maybe you commented on earlier in your presentation, but I joined late. The big cities of Wisconsin have leaders that are on board. They get it. Climate is an issue. We need to do something. And as Jed was commenting, it's like we knock on the doors and we preach to the choir, and they say, yeah, you're right, but Republicans. At the same time, we see these helpful or encouraging polls that say a majority, a significant majority, recognizes climate as an issue. How do we engage the non-urban, the perhaps we want to call them, or the rural communities of Wisconsin? How do we get them to tell their representatives, I'm a constituent and this is a problem you should do something about? Because right now it doesn't, the Republicans don't listen to us in Madison because the Republicans are not amongst those that are representing us, at least by district. Anyways, I think I've sketched the challenge, and hope you might have some wisdom and insight to share.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I don't know that I have kind of, unfortunately, right, the silver bullet. If we knew, if there was a silver bullet, we'd be working on it. But I guess, I mentioned that over the last 4 years, I have been on a number of committees where we have actually created policy to respond to the impacts of climate change, but we don't create policy to address climate change, right? Whether, I remember one in particular that was about, it was about driving milk trucks and how like changes in seasons and weather made it such that we needed to change regulations around when people could drive milk trucks, and a couple of other agricultural impacts. I do think that understanding is growing. We talked a little bit about the Wisconsin Farmers Union. They certainly are very engaged on this issue, and are trying to do what they can to work with their members to be advocates in the communities where they live. I guess what I would say is sort of this somewhat general piece again on figuring out what the frame is in each place that makes sense. And I will say, this isn't sort of a fully formed thought, but I've had the experience, and I think many others have had the experience during COVID in the last 2 years, of thinking that something that was not possible, it became possible. Right? Like our lives really dramatically shifted because of things that we could not control. And I do think that there is a metaphor there that hopefully we can learn from this and not put ourselves in this situation again, and actually do more to prepare for the impacts of climate change that are coming. So my hope is that, right, as we continue to talk to people around Wisconsin, we can point to those 500-year floods that keep happening, those again, changing growing seasons. My sister is sort of a small farmer and has been a small farmer, and talked about how when the ground doesn't freeze through in the same way, right, it means that farming is different and it's more expensive and you have to use different pesticides and things than in the spring. People feel that, they know that that's happening, and it's just providing a way for people to engage that feels resonant to their experience, right? And again, it doesn't have to be talking about climate change. It can be talking about sustainable farming, or providing those opportunities for people to make ends meet in rural areas, or not have their bridges flooding out, or whatever it is. So I think we just keep trying to find those points of common ground. Organizations are coming up that work on these issues that are, have different political persuasions. I think that's a good thing. And we just, try to find those moments of connection with people and provide solutions that will really make their lives better in the here and now.
Thank you, Greta.
Yeah.
And thanks, Kurt. All right. Professor George Stone, who leads us nationally and internationally.
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment in general that we need to remind ourselves that climate change, which used to be more appropriately known as global warming, is a long-term phenomenon, human caused, but it's going to be around for a long time. the average lifetime of a carbon dioxide molecule is over a century. So the CO2, which the combustion of fossil fuels primarily has put into the atmosphere, is going to be around for many centuries. So we need to take, the point is we need to take the long-term view and realize that the effects, the changes are going to be cumulative. On the other hand, we don't want to be fatalistic because it's still not too late for us to slow it down and prevent the worst. But we've got to take it seriously now. And because it is a long-term threat if we care about future generations.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you, Dr. Stone. Lisa Conley.
Oh, hi. I'm out in Oconomowoc, so I'm in one of those districts that you're talking about how to influence. And it's a pretty red area where we are, and we're gerrymandered, so it's going to stay that way, I think. Somebody I know there's a bipartisan bill to introduce final five voting, which would give us an open primary and then an instant runoff with the final five people. And the idea is that this would facilitate less parties butting heads and more discussion about issues. Is that pie in the sky, or do you think that that might actually either get through or be effective in helping loosen up some of the absolute stalemate that we've had on so many issues?
Yeah, thank you, Lisa, for this question. You know, I would need to revisit to sort of speak specifically to that bill because I'm forgetting exactly how it's drafted. I know we've talked about ranked choice voting for a while, and I think there is really some merit to that. You know, generally what I will say is that clearly we have a problem in Wisconsin. I think a lot of that has to do with gerrymandering, but there are other pieces that that we can work on as well. You know, I hope to see campaign finance reform at the federal level, right? Voting rights improvements. So, you know, those to me feel like kind of the central three pieces that we need to make happen. But I certainly think that continuing to try and find opportunities to diminish some of the partisanship that we have right now in Wisconsin and this country are good. It's not helping anyone that we're in a situation in which you know, both sides are so entrenched. And you know, I of course would argue that what we are fighting for is what the people of Wisconsin want to see happen and popular policies. But you know, we're in a really challenging moment around partisanship, and it is really it is unclear how we move forward and how we try to have a shared investment in preserving our democracy and governing collaboratively. So always think it's good to, think about creative ideas and try and keep that discussion going. So.
Thanks,
well,
Greta.
the final five, I understand, is 10% of people vote in the primary. If the parties kind of pick their candidate that they're going to pick, and it's not that it's closed primary, so you can't cross the lines and vote for who you think has got the best ideas in whatever party. It kind of locks in the top two contenders that the party chooses and backs in a primary with only 10% of people paying attention. And I think the final five idea is that you have an open primary in Wisconsin like other states have.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
allow more dialogue and less ability for the party to absolutely pick their candidate.
No. Well, thank you, Lisa. And I just want a point of information. The state of Maine, the city of San Francisco, and other communities have used instant runoff voting. And it's the most efficient and effective and cost efficient. But, you know, it's been a struggle here in the United States for 20 years that I've supported instant runoff voting. And I do believe in it, but that's a whole other subject. And so thank you, Lisa. Hey, Bruce, what's happening? Bruce Wiggins has also been very active in the city county task force, especially around food waste. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you. I'm asking a question I put in the chat some time ago. I think it got buried. We have a problem with pipelines in Wisconsin, and a lot of Republicans are really against eminent domain. So I'm wondering if Republicans and Democrats can get together on taking away the power of eminent domain from pipeline companies and so-called kill two birds with one stone, or one piece of legislation anyway.
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, I don't know kind of what those discussions have looked like in the past, but certainly know that, you know, there are significant impacts we've seen in Wisconsin from spills, and of course, ongoing discussion of new pipelines. So I think worth trying to raise that discussion and just see where you can find bipartisanship. Yeah, I like the creativity there and trying to find, you know, an in, and yeah, definitely encourage you all to see where that goes.
Yeah, is that something you can explore in your caucus?
Yeah, it's something, you know, we've got a couple different pieces coming in terms of fossil fuel infrastructure. And I think it'll be interesting to see kind of the response from Republicans and then see, yeah, if we can try and find some common ground there. So yeah, I definitely appreciate that suggestion.
Yeah, maybe a lot of Republicans are against eminent domain by government. They may not be quite as opposed to what they perceive as an economic development agency, but I think it's worth exploring.
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
Well, thanks, Greta, and thank you very much, Bruce. Hey, Charlie.
Yeah, Greta, it seems to me that most of the Republican bills get vetoed by the governor. And I guess the question to you is, do you think that, let's assuming the governor gets reelected, will that encourage the Republicans to be more open to compromising if they know that most of their bills are going to be vetoed by the governor?
You know, I hope so. I think we've unfortunately seen kind of the same strategy as Republicans at the federal level used during the Obama presidency, which was essentially their goal was to make President Obama not successful. And I think we've seen a lot of that here in Wisconsin too. In the last couple of session days, you know, we've just had bill after bill that, you know, the governor clearly said that's a non-starter, but yet the bill moves forward, right? And we say, hey, if you change this piece, or if you looked at a different funding mechanism, like we could be having a real conversation, but that they're not interested in that, right? So I do think that if the governor was reelected and they were looking at 4 years, there may be a different opportunity there for some more bipartisanship, just because it's a long time to wait to continue just using that sort of method of stonewalling.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Greta. Hey, thanks, Charlie. I see, I'm ahead of Tom. I'm gonna let you go, Tom, and then I'll come after you. Hey, Tom Siri.
Yeah, Greta. So on that point, I mean, the governor can veto things. Right now, how many Democrats are in the assembly of the 99?
38.
So you guys can support the governor and he doesn't get overridden by the Republicans. Okay. Will you send me the address of the Assembly Democratic Campaign Committee? I think that's the name. Will you send that address to me? Because I think we got to make sure you guys, you know, even despite gerrymandering, you know, that there's still a strong body of Democrats in the assembly. So if you could send that address to me, I would appreciate it. Thank
Sure
you.
can. Yeah. Thanks,
Okay.
Tom.
Hey, thank you, Greta. Thank you, Tom. And I'm just going to do a time check. We have about 10 minutes before we toss it back to Julie. And one of the things in the bike rack is the coming rally in Madison, I think on March 25th. But I want to take it to another level. Because, hey, Tom and Greta, you guys were talking about, Tom was talking about campaign support. and I'm going to be the bad guy and bring up money in politics. I'll tell you, it ticks me off to find out that Congress has never bought the fossil fuel industry before them for a hearing, as they did with the tobacco industry, and improve the health across our country. And, and it's called lobbying, and it's called money in politics. And that's what hurt us so much. As we talk about how we change things in Wisconsin or in Milwaukee, there's so much that we can't do because of the state legislature. There's so much that we can't do because of the National Congress and the EPA and politics and control. And so I'm passionate about this whole thing about money in politics, and I want to know how you feel about it, because as a young, vibrant politician, we look for you to be effective at the state level and then move on to the national level. And so it's a very relevant point that I'd like your opinion on. It's difficult.
Yeah.
So thank you, Greta.
Yeah, no, thank you, George, for that question. Absolutely understand this to be a huge problem, and did sign on personally to the pledge not to accept fossil fuel money, and got some pushback on that, right? So I think that just goes to show that people understand money in politics to be really effective if they're the one who's contributing and who's getting an audience because of that. So yeah, I mean, absolutely hope that we can see action on that. Of course, that would be at the federal level. It's crucial. And I think a lot of the challenges that we're facing right now on climate, it will be hard for us to make the progress we need to on the timeline we need to if we continue to see money flood in the way that it has. So yeah, really appreciate you raising that.
Yeah, and I just want to throw in one more comment, okay? And it's nothing that you can answer. But to me, it's so counteractive that our congressional representatives spend a third of their time raising money for other people in their party, as opposed to representing the needs of their constituency. So that's my comment. I'm out of it. Anybody else for the stack?
If you don't mind, George, I'll just say one more little thing. Yeah. Just want to really thank everybody for this time. It is really energizing to me to get to spend time with people in the climate movement. And always, really reminds me why we do this work. And, I'll say, right, looking at the faces here, obviously a number of folks who, let's just, maybe are a little bit on the older side, or let's say middle-aged, right? And I just want to thank you all, because I know that, for so many people, my parents and grandparents, like it's really painful to know that sort of this is the world that like your kids and grandkids are going to be inheriting. And so, as someone coming to you from the younger generation, just want to thank you all, and also want to say that the fight is long, the battle is long, and I hope that you all can find ways to contribute that feel meaningful and be part of this community, and keep up the fight, because from the inside of the Capitol, I will tell you, even if the letters go unanswered or the calls, like people are getting them, they are reading them, and they are noting that they're coming in, right? And the dialogue is moving. And so I hope that you all can see that and feel and appreciate that. And also, not have the seriousness of this crisis mean that you don't get to appreciate other things in life, because I know that this work can be really, really heavy. So just want to thank you all so much for the work that you're doing and for the partnership that we all have in this work. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Greta. We're going to stretch it a few more minutes.
Okay.
Before we turn it over to Julian. Kermit's got 2 cents he wants to throw.
Okay, I'm ready.
Hey, Kermit.
Oh, I could get up to a whole quarter if I had the time, but just to keep it focused, Greta, I seem to recall hearing and or reading that you are now the Assembly Minority Leader. And I'm just wondering if you could say a little bit, if unless you have already, about how that's going to be playing out in terms of your responsibilities and ability to engage us and others that are concerned about the climate.
Yeah.
Is it extra easy now, or is it going to be extra hard?
So I have a lot of new responsibilities, for folks who maybe aren't quite as acquainted with this. So I'm the leader for the Assembly Democrats now, our caucus of 38. So I would say that I think, I certainly will continue to work on this issue and talk about it and try and support the work that the movement's doing. I think I also am working with other Democratic legislators to, support them to step up on some of these bills. The package that I mentioned earlier that I ran through, our Forward on Climate package, was authored by very wide range. I think just about every Democrat in the legislature is on one of those bills, authoring or signed on to at least one. And so, we've got a lot of folks who do want to lead on this issue. When I came in 4 years ago, there were definitely a few people working on it, but even just in our caucus now, and we have kind of our informal climate caucus meetings, a lot of people on there, right? A lot of people who want to do this work. So you'll see more from a number of other legislators as we go forward. But I also certainly hope to use my office as a place that does more coordination around both the policy and the organizing side. I've been in an office with 2 staff for a while, and now we've got 6, right? So we have a lot of new responsibilities, but we also really have a focus both on our policy and communications teams of working with stakeholders and working with people outside of the Capitol to both put out policy that responds to what people of Wisconsin want to see happen, and then to coordinate with individuals and groups outside the Capitol in the organizing side and promoting those bills and those policies. So we're excited about that. So definitely still a resource as we go forward.
I'll jump in real quick. I was just going to say, you mentioned Climate Caucus. How can we get in touch with that and or support that and encourage you and the rest of them?
Yeah, it's a little informal at this point. Basically, we have met a number of times, and sort of whoever is interested and available will join for those meetings. But if there are kind of specific policies, I would say that you all want to advocate on, definitely can point you in the direction of legislators. We still are hoping to have some more opportunities for advocacy this year. We talked about doing kind of like a climate week or some other opportunity for people to highlight the things they want to see happen and work with stakeholders on that. So definitely we'll keep you all posted, if those things come together.
Well, thank you, Greta. And that's a perfect segue for us to say, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Keep up the
Thank you
good
very
work.
much. I think we learned a lot and we shared a lot. I see Greg's hand. No, I think we're clear. Tom, I want to toss it back to Julie. We've got about 5 minutes left. And we have the question that was raised by, I think, Jed earlier about the March 25th march in Madison.
I'll hop off with that. Thank you all so much for having me again. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Greta.
Thank you,
Take care.
Greta.
So there's a series of events that are going to be happening in the next couple of months on Fridays for the Future. It's a coalition of a number of organizations in Wisconsin that have come together under Building Unity, which is a coalition of activist groups. And they're calling to start on March 4th and to go from March 4th to Earth Day is their slogan, March 4th to Earth Day. And so that every Friday in that period of time, that people around the state and small towns and larger communities would come out on Friday at noon. And they looked at our 350 group in Milwaukee as like one of the models for that, because we do that on a regular basis every Friday noon. We're out in front of one of the banks. So this is kind of picking up on that and enlarging it across the state. So we'd be having unified actions. Now, there's some people are saying, well, they want to do something special on March 4th, the first day. Other people are saying, well, we should do things on Earth Day at the end of it, which is April 22nd, and have that be like the final thing that we build for over that period of a couple of months. And you know, we probably would continue to focus on Chase Bank, since that's the place where we're making the most impact and having access to talking to people in the banks. So this other issue that you just surfaced of having something in Madison on the 25th of March, that's also a Friday. That would be probably one of the things that would happen over this period of Fridays. And do you have some more to say about that? Who is it that brought that up? I'm sorry. Was it?
I thought it was Jed. And I don't think he's with us yet.
Oh, maybe not.
It was actually me.
Okay, Eric.
Eric.
Yeah, I don't really have any great input to add other than I would help organize something if the group as a whole felt it was something worth doing and we could actually get enough participation. And the March isn't always the best weather to do a big march in March.
Yeah.
Which could be a problem. For that reason alone, you know, maybe Earth Day makes more sense because it's a month later.
Yeah.
I guess I was just kind of throwing it out there as,
yeah,
you know, a big march gets a lot more attention. It gets media's attention. It gets people showing up. It gets young people motivated.
Yeah. Well, it's been about, well, I guess it's almost 3 years now, because COVID's gone on for 2 years, hasn't it? That since we've had a really big demonstration in downtown Milwaukee, and it was in coalition with a lot of the younger activist groups. And we had a marching band from North Division High School, and we had a big, was it 11 people, I believe, who were arrested at Wells Fargo Bank on Water in Wisconsin, after doing a sit-in inside that bank. And it was a lot of action that day. And so it's been a bit since then. I think mainly COVID has shut things down as far as having big actions. And hopefully by April 22nd on Earth Day, things are going to be better and we can do something outside that would be larger and pull together a coalition of groups to work together on something for Earth Day. So that's one suggestion that we might want to work towards. Any thoughts about that? Yeah.
And Julie, let me intervene here with the time check, because we're running out of time very quickly here. Any thoughts? You know, please put it online to any one of our members of our steering committee, or in terms of that. And right now, I just want to quickly thank the members of our steering committee: Julie Inslow, Greg Walter, Jan Walter, Charlie Benziger, Tom Seary, Chris Meyer, George Stone, Linda Frank. I don't hope I've not left anybody out. Yeah, but that's how we plan and move forward into the next meetings. Is that right?
Okay, thank you, everyone. We'll see you next month. And we'll be in touch in between. Be sure to listen for and watch for your email alerts and for the actions that you can take that Greg always includes in those emails. and also the in-depth links for more information on these issues that he puts in those emails. He has some really good stuff out there. So thank you, Greg Walter, for doing that.
Good meeting. Thanks, George.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Night.
As usual, George, you've outdone yourself.
Oh,